I'm going to go ahead and record this thing. Thanks to everyone who is showing up and trickling in. I know it's only 1 minute in. Now, here's the thing: Jerred is like one of the most efficient people I know. And I like to think of myself as an efficient guy as well. So I think we're going to skip the small talk Jerred's already been on my podcast. We might just roll right into this thing and kind of get going. But, you know, an important formality, Jerred, can you please explain to folks how you would explain Endo 3 Fitness and Garage Gym Athlete as a brand to someone out there?
Yeah, so Into Three Fitness would be considered the parent company, and what we focus on more these days is coaching education, basically on programming alone, not much other stuff, a little bit of business information as well. And that's where Into Three Fitness is headed heavily, especially into 2021. And then Garage Gym Athlete would be a company under that that is the implementation of that programming. So specifically for athletes. That is the two branches, helping coaches grow and learn what they need to know, and then also helping athletes succeed.
Yeah, perfect, man. So let's jump into Garage Athlete a little bit. When I first came across this brand, I loved the marketing you guys were doing and still are doing today. You basically made it seem like you don't need to have a fancy gym to get a great workout in. And I think there's no better example of that, of the workouts that you program on Saturday, which you call
Meet Yourself Saturday workouts. Yeah.
Meet Yourself Saturday workouts. So who came up with Meet Yourself Saturdays, and what does a Meet Yourself Saturday workout look like?
Yeah, so the story behind it, Garage Gym Athlete had started pretty early on, and at that same time, I had dedicated to do the workout Murph, which is a relatively high volume, challenging workout. Dedicated myself to doing it every Saturday for a year, and so I did it that first year. I ended up doing it 2 years in a row, but I did it that first year, and at the end of that, there was like a gap, and every Saturday I'd gotten accustomed to this, really hard workout on Saturday, and I wanted to fill that void, but I didn't necessarily at that time just want to do more Murph because you do work out 52 times, one that difficult, and you're actually pushing yourself, it becomes challenging. So we put in this Meet Yourself Saturday workout where we would just program challenging stuff. So anything that's going to push you, we try to rig them in such a way that you can't really cheat them. And that's a big thing. I was a physical training leader in the military, and that's like the whole game with these young people in the military. I'm talking about like 18, 19-year olds, is you can give the workout, but they're going to game the crap out of it and see how they can cheat it. Like if we're doing burpee broad jumps for 5 minutes, they do a burpee as slow as they could, jump 6 inches. So you have to okay, well, then you have to go a couple football fields. You have to do it in a certain way that makes it uncheatable and also crappy. And the reason we do that is because outside the programming, it's going to help you build that mental toughness. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is work on the psyche of the athlete beyond just the programming itself.
Do you ever find yourself having to strike a balance between writing a workout that sucks on a Saturday and one that will suck and people will like? Because I mean, you can give someone a really hard workout. It's not a hard thing to do, right? How do you find out what people like while also making it challenging?
Yeah, so we program in 12-week cycles, and 4 days out of the week are 100% dedicated towards goal focused programming. And so that's what we're going to do for 12 weeks at a time. And then that Saturday is always just going to be this meet yourself option. And so it really tries to go beyond just making it hard, from the sense of, like you could just make something high volume and that would be kind of crappy. Right. And so that's easy to do. We try to get in people's heads by we do, just speaking of Murph, we have a workout and it's actually coming up this weekend, zone 2 Murph. So we make you complete the workout Murph while being in the heart rate zone 2. It is the most mentally frustrating workout that anyone will ever complete on the planet, because it's very hard to do that workout staying in zone 2 is very, very challenging. And so that it's not a hard one though. There's nothing overly hard about very low intensity work, right? It's just getting in your head. And so we have to sell the community on the fact that these are beneficial workouts for other reasons. And so we don't cater as much to what would you like to see this weekend, and it's more here's what we challenge you to do.
Yeah, that's cool, man. About your clients, for those listening, Jerred has a podcast for End of Three or Garage Gym Fitness. I'm not much sure which you brand it by. But the unique thing about your podcast is you interview your clients, people who train with Garage Gym Athlete, and you don't try to go out there and bring in the top strength coaches or celebrity fitness folks. You just interview your folks. At what point did you figure out this was the way and this was how I wanted to brand my podcast? And what's the purpose behind the podcast, behind doing that?
Yeah, so I've been podcasting for a long time, and I had a podcast previous to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. I mean, the Garage Gym Athlete podcast has been around for a number of years now, but I had already done a podcast that I had done 200 interviews on. So I had interviewed 200 different people at the top of their fields, from doctors to top strength coaches and all of those things. And there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes I feel like there's this disconnect between when you do bring in someone of that caliber, the information becomes unrelatable. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you're just trying to get some sort of like information about a very specific topic, it can be incredibly helpful. Like, we all know that it's a good strategy to interview experts in the field, but I'm just trying to get our athletes to connect with sticking to workouts and being successful in these things. And I don't think that you need those people. They just need to hear other people in the trenches of life doing what they're doing, but succeeding in that process. And so we transitioned a couple years ago to where we only interview our athletes. We get a number of requests on a weekly basis for people, hey, can I be interviewed on your podcast? And the answer is no. Like, if you sign up for the programming and do it for a couple cycles, then we will definitely consider interviewing you. But that's just how we do it, because we're really trying to build a community of athletes, and not like I said, we've done the other style of podcast and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a matter of that's not what we're looking to do anymore.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate now that we're in the new year, January 5th, to talk about people who set out to make changes with their fitness. You've seen your fair share of folks who signed up for your program and bailed out, and you've seen your fair share of people who signed up for your program and have stuck with it for years. In your opinion, what is the difference maker in someone who sticks with a resolution to get fit versus someone who bails out?
Yeah, I see the most success, especially amongst our athletes, are those who do focus on those process goals. And that's something that we have been reiterating a lot as we came up closer to the new year and over the last year. And now that we're into the new year, is focusing on the process and not so much whatever that end goal may be. Like, if you want to lose 30 pounds or add 30 pounds to your back squat, that's great. That's admirable. But let's forget about that and let's just focus on, how many training sessions can you complete over the next
Mm,
30 days? So really focusing on process goals and not outcome goals. That way you get accustomed to focusing on the process, because at the end of, say you wanted to add 30 pounds to your back squat or lose 30 pounds, you work 12 weeks to do it and you don't achieve it. Um, and you're only focused on the outcome, you're going to be very frustrated. But if you're focused on the process and you're like, well, I completed, 90 workouts or how many ever workouts you completed in 12 weeks, and I am better for it, that's a much better view of goals in general, as opposed to just focusing on that one outcome. No different than business. If you set a goal to double your business next year and you only got 75% of the way there, in what way is that a failure? You know what I mean? You've grown your business significantly, so why would you care if it wasn't all the way to that double mark? So those are what we see with athletes specifically, is focusing on that process as opposed to the outcome.
Do you make like a conscious effort to communicate this to folks who sign up? Like, if I signed up for your program, how would you maybe try to change the way I thought about how I would make progress on this journey?
Yeah, so this is a big thing. If we got into everything that we did for our athletes to try and support them, there would be a lot. But we
Mm,
have one specific thing that's pretty cool. It took some work to be able to set it up, some programming, if you will, basic programming. I don't want to say that in front of a guy who runs a software company, because it's not your level of deep. But we teach people, we kind of have like a goals course. So we teach them how to make these goals, what's appropriate, what the research says on those who are successful in achieving their goals. And it is basically an email campaign that educates them on this process. But then further than that, we have them this one little form where they, after they've kind of been educated on that, they fill out their goal. And now we know their goal. And with some, like I said, email campaign programming handiwork, they are emailed their goal on a weekly basis as a reminder. And we give them more tidbits. And this is over the course of 12 weeks. You're constantly reminded about your goal, what it is. You can turn the emails off at any time if you want to, like if you're not sticking them to them and it's just becoming annoying. But we do a lot of education on what good goal setting is, and then you even have the opportunity to be reminded from us on a weekly basis what that goal is.
Yeah. And that's a really good example of how end of three fitness, you have been able to scale the kind of value that you deliver to clients. I don't think we would be holding a webinar here kind of giving advice on how to have 5 clients, right? Or 10. That should be pretty manageable from a logistics perspective, programming perspective, payment processing perspective. But you've discovered some really neat ways to kind of deliver value to a lot of athletes. Are you open about how many athletes train with End of Three Fitness or Garage Gym Athlete?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of keep it generic in the thousands, just because we work with them in multiple
Hmm.
different ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's roughly 2 to 3 thousand athletes in all the different programs and services that we provide, like on a monthly basis.
Yeah. But I recall from our podcast when you first were starting your business, you had obviously less clients, but you were charging a higher price on a monthly basis. And eventually your business model evolved to kind of scaling out your volume and charging a lower price. For instance, I think Garage Gym Athlete, I think it's $25 a month. Is that right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Um, what allowed you to do that? What allowed you to pursue volume at a lower price as opposed to, if you have 100 clients at a high monthly rate, that's a pretty comfortable business. So what kind of accelerated you towards a higher volume business?
Well, I was very clear on who I was trying to serve. I mean, to answer from a tactical level, we had a lot of the assets as far as traffic and advertising to be able to go for volume,
Mm.
but at the same time, I was not trying to tailor Garage Gym Athlete to, uh, you know, let's just say some rich guy who can spend $1,000 a month or $600 a month on personalized strength and conditioning programming. Right? That's back in the day. It's a little bit different now because so many people are Garage Gym Athletes that there is a wide range. There are people who are just trying to save money, and then there are people who are incredibly wealthy. But when I first started this, it was primarily I would always survey my customers, and that's a good takeaway. Is something that you should do. Like, we'd always survey them, and money was always a big factor in why somebody became a Garage Gym Athlete. It was, I'm tired of paying gym membership fees, and so they want to be um, cut off from that. So even offering a monthly recurring service to a Garage Gym Athlete at first was a hard sell, because it's like, no, dude, I got the garage gym where I don't have to pay monthly stuff anymore. But then you provide enough value. So we priced it lower, saying all that to say, and to answer your question, we priced it lower because that's who our customer was. They didn't want to
Hmm.
pay a lot of money for programming. And so that's what we were trying to do. And then I had to answer all the questions or solve all the problems of, like, what you're saying. How do we scale value if we're going to go this way? And luckily, there are a lot of like great pieces of software out there. Team Builder is one of them that we use, and other email automation and service providers that help you do those things. But it's pretty simple these days to be able to scale that value.
Yeah, I agree. What do you ask of your customers as far as equipment? Did you have prerequisites, requirements for signing up, or?
No, not anymore, because we have multiple different tracks in which someone can train, and we have a body weight only track. So you can join if you have only body weight, and I think that that's a good thing. We don't see a lot of people signing up specifically for body weight programming, but we see a lot of our athletes who would have otherwise quit our programming if we didn't provide that
Hmm.
option. Like, they might be going
Hmm.
through like a 2 or 3 month thing where they don't have access to equipment, and so we move them to the body weight programming. Then after that, the if you want to go full programming and all the equipment, it's very minimal. We never require more than, our typical equipment list is barbell, plates, kettlebell, pull-up bar, plyometric box, and that's about it.
Hmm.
All you need to do everything that we're doing.
Of those pieces that you mentioned, do you favor any one over the other? Do you think one piece of equipment is king?
You know, I used to say it was the barbell. And of those, I will still say it's the barbell, just because
Really?
of how much you can get done with just a barbell and the stimulus you can create. So I do think the barbell is the most important. But if I really had to pick one these days, it might just be a pull up bar. But that's
Oh,
more
really?
personal preference, because if you're thinking longevity. If I only had one thing, if I can only train one area for the rest of my life, it might just be calisthenics, because
Hmm.
I don't know. It's super challenging, and it's not hard on the body, not very hard on the body.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a pull-up bar is a very rare answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then I'm going to talk a little bit about programming. I have this hypothesis, and then I'm just going to throw it out there, and you can tear it apart or support it or whatever you want to do. I see coaches come in to team builders specifically for the online payments portal, and they're ready to sell their programs online. They have certifications that looks like the alphabet. They've got the background, they've got the experience. But what I sometimes notice is that there seems to be a tendency where coaches place a premium value, sometimes too much value, on their programming, and they forget about the other parts of what it takes to get someone to buy into your training program, your coaching program, whatever it is. As someone who does both, you sell training programs to athletes online, and then you also train coaches on how to program. Do you think that's true? Do you think some coaches overvalue their programming and thus neglect the other parts of getting people to buy into their coaching business?
I mean, I agree with you, but I would say my official stance is programming is very important, but you're also right. And this
Mm-hmm.
is something I do discuss with coaches all the time. If you ever become that coach who has that, like, I don't really do that, or I just want to focus on this thing, that's fine. You're not going to be a very successful business owner, but you'll might be fine as a coach, and you might have
Mm-hmm.
plenty of letters next to your name. But like you're saying, if you're not willing to figure out how to send a freaking newsletter, or some real basic stuff when you're starting out by yourself, if you're not willing to do those things, I call it the crusty coach syndrome, because and people, like, let's just use an exact example, like Mark Ripito. um, awesome dude, very successful business, very successful coach, but some people are like motivated by him and they want to try and mimic him. What Mark Ripito does and his attitude works for him, it will not work for you, it will not work for
Mm-hmm.
anybody else, because that's just him, and he's been doing it for like 40 years. And I see some coaches try and take that whole crusty, like, I don't give a damn type attitude, and it's not. You have to learn marketing, you have to learn sales, you have to learn what get people into the program. I'm a coach too. I wish I could ignore all of those things and only ever focus on the programming, but it's not the reality. If you want to be a good business owner, have a successful business, you have to learn all of those things until ultimately and hopefully you can pay others to do some of those things that you don't like as much. But you have to be able and willing to learn the other stuff when it comes to growing your business.
I think that's sometimes exemplified today by outfits or brands where the programming is it's nothing to write home about, but the marketing they've caught on to something. You could argue the boutique fitness craze. I'll name F45 and Orange Fitness and these kinds of places, CrossFit to a certain extent. I think if someone who gets off the couch and gets into that, they're going to see a benefit, right? No one argues with that. But their marketing is great. They've kind of figured out how to communicate, the fitness goal, the dream. Do you ever look at these trends and take away anything from them, or do you just kind of let them come and go? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think, I stay away from them for the most part. I do look at them. I find a lot of this stuff interesting, like what Peloton has done specifically with like home fitness, and how
Hmm.
they've tried to include things. I think a lot of that stuff is fascinating. But if, to your point, if they're it's two levers. I mentioned programming being really important, but also the front end marketing, sales, all that stuff being really important. You need to pull both. It's not really one or the other, because what I don't know, because I haven't seen their numbers, but what I would guess about a lot of these other businesses that you've mentioned is they pulled the marketing lever hard, but they also know that their stick rate for an athlete is 2 to 3 months, and they're okay with that
Hmm.
level of churn, and so they need to be pulling that marketing lever really hard. But I would argue, if you pull the marketing lever really hard, but you also pull this, I'm going to take really good care of my athletes and I'm going to program to the best of my ability for results. You pull that lever really hard as well, and now your business can really grow. And so, and you don't have to get accustomed to this. Someone only sticks around for a couple weeks. mentality, you can take this, okay, this athlete will be here for a couple of years because that's how awesome we are. And I think that should be the expectation.
Yeah, I want to talk about churn because anyone who gets a business up and going and then experiences churn knows that it's a hard thing to deal with.
Hmm.
We at Team Builder have worked with a business in the past that is moderately successful at selling programs online for a pretty high premium, say 100 to 200 bucks a month. The hardest thing was not getting people in the door. They were effective at that. The hardest thing was that when the 3 months was up, how can you get the majority of these people to pay again for another 3 months and stay on the program? And it made me think about, okay, marketing to get a person in the door, that's step one. Step two is getting them to renew and buy 3 more months of programming. I'm sure you've had a lot of thoughts and experience around this. How do you approach churn? How do you get people, once they get past the initial excitement of buying a new program, because we're all excited when we get the new program, right? It looks great. But 3 months into it, how do you get someone to stick?
Yeah, and that's a great question. What's funny about that business model is that's how we started even before the use of Team Builder. Were 3 month programs, and
Hmm.
I feel like I only ever had enough oxygen to breathe for 90 days at a time, and it was a
Yeah.
really stressful environment to live in because it really would be like we would launch, and then after that week, there'd be no stress, but I knew it was only for a limited amount of time before we had to
Yeah.
do it again, and hopefully just as many people signed up or renewed. So that is a very tough business model, or just launch models in general are very, very tough. So churn is very important and to focus on. You need to be tracking that, and how quickly do they leave and for what reasons. So we survey a lot of our customers as soon as someone cancels. We ask why and survey. Those emails get directed to me. If they reply, also they can fill out a survey, so I see the feedback directly. And there's not very many ways to email me directly from the company, so that tells
Mhm.
you how important it is to me to know these things, because if it's something that we can fix right away, we'll fix it right away. And so paying really close attention to that, getting that feedback, and then just slowly making your process better by learning what wasn't effective. You can't be scared to ask your customers. I think that's the biggest
Mhm.
thing that people, they don't want to do. They're like, they have this. You're not God. You're not there to pretend like you have everything perfect. Even if you're like, hey, we're trying to make this better. Like, how could we? To people who've canceled in the past, and that could even get them to come back. So I think you need to get as much information as you can, but you also need to focus an incredible amount of your time, effort, and energy on the retention of your athletes. Uh, I was looking at our YouTube account this earlier today because we were doing some stuff, and we have, I don't know, it's probably several hundreds of videos that are public, just like podcasts and interviews and stuff that we've done. Um, we have several thousand, I mean, thousands upon thousands of videos that they're unlisted and they're only for our athletes. And so, as far as content production, we're 80% taking care of our athletes and 20% front end stuff that people should listen to or care about. And so, all of those are our retention strategies. We're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes to take care of them. And that was a big mental shift for me, let's say 2.5 years ago, was I was almost too focused on that front end. How can we get more people in the door? And then I switched all of my time and attention to how do I just take care of the people I have as to the best extent possible. And it's kind of like
Mhm.
juggling. You do this one for a little while, and then you do the other one, and then eventually, you get good at, okay, I think I can do both of these at the same time, or at least have my team leverage the ability to do these things at the same time.
Yeah, amazing. So for folks here listening, if they're a personal trainer with 5 in-person clients or have 20 online clients, if someone goes, you would encourage them to throw them a survey or at least ask them like, hey, would you mind telling me why you left?
If they leave,
Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely do that. Even we have the process automated. If it was in person, I would just ask, but I do think some sort of exit survey is great because you want as much open feedback as you can too. Not It's easier for people to answer like on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate us and those kind of things. But I'm more interested in their actual open-ended response. I want to know what
Mhm.
you said because they'll give you the friction points that they had and maybe in signing up or something they didn't like about the programming. And there's some things that you run into and you're just like, I absolutely can't fix that. Maybe we should part ways. And then there are other ways that you can fix the problems and you didn't even know they were problems. And so I think an exit survey is absolutely something every coach or personal trainer should have.
Yeah. Back to the topic of YouTube, like you mentioned, it doesn't take much for people to create content these days. The iPhone takes incredible video. You can upload it to YouTube right there after you took the video on your phone. Um, do you encourage your coaches that you mentor and train to create their own unique content? Is that something that you think is important?
I think content is really important. I think that's the main thing that you need to keep doing, but you have to think of content as, seeds. You're planting all of these seeds, and it can take several years for these seeds to turn into trees, right? And but that's the mentality you have to take. I think people get annoyed because they post some sort of video or podcast and they're like, "Oh man, I only got like 75 downloads or 75 views." But that everyone started there. Everyone started somewhere with producing content, and you just have to keep planting these seeds. And then after you've done it for a few years, you will have these gigantic oaks. And so I think the ability, in creating content, the ability to upload, like you're saying, quickly is awesome, and people should embrace it. I know something that's happened with us that we've kind of gotten rid of was this trying to have higher production, higher quality type videos, and then we just abandoned it because it's just not really in our wheelhouse to be able to do. I'm not gonna have people come over to my house, this video crew. I'm not a vlogger. Like, I don't do those things, but we do create a ton of video content for people, and I think that it's really easy to do, and you don't need to worry so much about how professional it is or anything like that.
Yeah. The funny thing about our YouTube channel, when I go back and look at it, we have exercise demo videos done, by coaches who are also our customers. And the most viewed video in our YouTube channel is of a guy standing on a turf field doing trunk circles, like hip circles.
Yeah.
It's like a 10-second video. It's got 75,000 views. And the guy is just for 10 seconds doing trunk circles one way and then the other way. Most random thing ever. I've got podcasts with the strength coach of the Golden State Warriors, a couple of days after they won the NBA title, and it has like a couple hundred views. It makes no sense to me how sometimes things get viewed and searched on YouTube, but sometimes things catch fire and you just never know.
Yeah, things can blow up without your intent, right? We've had that with content. I mentioned Murph, right? I was doing Murph every week for a year, and I wrote articles about that. And then it took time, but after a couple years, around Memorial Day, when everyone does Murph, I'm probably one of the most trafficked sites in existence around that
Wow.
workout because people are looking for tips, tricks, and ideas for that. That was not strategic on my part in any sense, but it's kind of
Yeah.
like the hip circles thing you're talking about. I didn't think that would happen, but it did. It's just like a seed that got planted and blew up.
Did you become like a rock star in the CrossFit space after that?
No, I'm a lot of CrossFitters do not like me, so it's just
Really? Have you
yeah,
spoken out?
yeah. I just haven't been. I'm not super pro CrossFit. I was,
Mm-hmm.
I was. If you like research me, I was. Like you'll find
Mm-hmm.
stuff about me in CrossFit, and that's fine. I just ultimately didn't agree with the intensity piece of it, and that pisses a lot of people off.
Okay, so it was mostly a qualm with the programming.
Yeah, that's me, man. Well, I mean, I was never a fan of Glassman. I'm glad that he's
Mm-hmm.
gone now. So I was
Mm-hmm.
never a fan of him. So I could never get on board with the company because I was
Yeah.
never a fan of that dude,
Yeah.
and then the programming piece, I didn't enjoy. And now a lot of that's the programming hasn't changed, but the CEO has changed, and so I'm sure they're doing great things. But at this point, there's no reason for me to try and get more involved with that community.
Yeah, I think they're reorienting. But as for Glassman, I mean, it's not rocket science. If the guy is the loudest person in the room and banging his chest, they're compensating, and it's just not gonna. It doesn't fly with a lot of folks. I mean, you know this from being an understudy of your arts and crafts. The more you know, the more you kind of just tend to listen and talk about it. He just seemed like he was talking more and more over the years. Anyway, that's my little tangent. We don't have to get more into that. But we have a couple of people in attendance here. Sam Whitney, who I know is a strength coach at Temple University, but I know he has a personal training business and clients on the side. I want to let folks listening in, but please ask your questions. Jerred is, gratefully an open book and very transparent with how he built his business, and he can give a lot of advice here. And I guess in the meantime, we'll kind of advance. If you could kind of identify who your main client is at Garage Gym Athlete, um, I'm more interested in knowing what they did before they got to Garage and Athlete. What did they try? I'm sure you have some former CrossFit people in there, but what did they come from that didn't work out for them where Garage and Athlete did work out for them?
Yeah, we, you know, it's funny to see the transition as we interview a lot of our athletes, as you mentioned earlier, and we kind of always ask that question: what were you doing before you were a garage gym athlete? And early on, it was a lot of I used to do CrossFit, and then they just realized they could do it at home, and so they start doing that. But then they also realize they're not very good at programming. So there was a lot of that. In that, there's been a big transition. I mean, really, it's been over like 6 to 8 months in interviews. Not as many people are answering. They used to do CrossFit. We're getting a lot more like powerlifters who realize it's not a healthy sport. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
no offense to any powerlifters, it's just not. It's hard on your body. There's not a lot of cardiovascular fitness involved and things. And so we're getting a lot of those people. But it's all very functional fitness related. People who enjoy Spartan races, people who do CrossFit, powerlifters, those kinds of things. We're not getting basically anybody who's like, oh yeah, I was doing back and buys at the Globo gym and then decided to do garage gym athlete. Not very many of those people. It's people who come from more of a sports or athletic background, or they're doing weekend warrior type activities.
yeah, cool. How many folks are coming to Garage and Athlete who are, the classic, I want to look good naked? Because I kind of feel like the aesthetic angle is kind of like the shiny, shimmering object at the bottom of the ocean that a lot of Instagram trainers, for instance, kind of try to leverage. Is that lever? I think it's okay to play that lever. You would probably agree, but do you think to some extent that's kind of overplayed the aesthetic component?
Yeah, it's incredibly overplayed. We have a track. It's called the shred track, which is more body composition related. So I think it's
Mm,
something you almost have to provide, even if it's within your parameters of programming and what you believe as a coach, because that's just going to be an option that people want. So you do have to listen to your customers in that degree. And again, that's how we created other training tracks for what we do is surveying our customers on what they wanted to see. And so I think that it's something that you should provide, but it's over the top, man. I think like we don't do before and after photos. We just decided that we started to, and then we toed them all down and decided that as a company, it's just not something that
wow,
we're going to
really
do. We
interesting.
do. If you go to our Garage Gym Athlete Instagram account, you'll see what we do. We do Athlete of the Week, and we have metrics. We track all metrics on athletes, and so and Team Builder helps in that process. But we'll say like added 40 pounds to the back squat, lost 15 pounds body weight. Like these are the metrics that we started to highlight, and we got away from any sort of before and after because it's just it's a hard business to be in when you're just trying to mimic everyone else, right? It is like, is that the path? Is that the journey for a coach? Is just to train a bunch of people and then end up with before and after photos, and then hopefully people sign up because you have those. It's just it's not a fun place to be. Unfortunately, it can be necessary to some degree, but yeah, I think it's overplayed if that's the only thing you're going for.
Yeah. What about the nutrition component of Garage Gym Athlete? You do provide resources as far as nutrition goes, right?
Yeah, we provide a lot of nutritional resources. We kind of have as kind of part of our onboarding, we give away it's like 9 weeks, 8 or 9 weeks of macro plans. So like meals broken down by macronutrients, and we help you calculate your macros if you want to hit a certain aesthetic goal, gain muscle, whatever it is. We kind of teach you, and that's a lot of what we do. One of our missions is to build autonomous athletes. So we want athletes to use us but not need us, if that makes
Mm,
sense. Like I can change my oil, but I don't change my oil. I go and let someone change my oil whenever oil is needed. And that's how I want our athletes to view us. Like I want you to be able to handle your own nutrition and not be spoon fed something like by me. And if you're around us long enough for a couple of years, I think that you should be able to program your own workouts in a similar fashion that we do, but you still want us to do it because we're taking
yeah.
that time, that service away from you having to do it. So that's kind of our stance.
Yeah. Recovery is all the rage nowadays. Everyone and their cousin I know owns a foam
Yeah.
roller. And actually, no, I'm sorry. 2 years ago, everyone and their cousin I knew owned a foam roller. Now everyone owns like a Hyperice or a
Right.
Jogku or one of those massage guns. But of course, you have to elicit a stress response in order to need some recovery, right? What do you talk about as far as recovery and or is that just kind of built into the way you? programming into your training sessions?
Yeah, so we built our recovery right into Team Builder itself. You guys have a great feature. Um, what's the purple one? It's like health science or
Yeah, yeah,
some,
sports science. Yeah,
yeah, sports science. And so we
yeah,
actually use Team Builder for that. We have nine things that we can 9 points people are trying to achieve each and every single day. So you guys have a nice way so they can tabulate that, and then it gives them points at the end, so it'll calculate that for
yeah,
them. And so we just have basic things that they track on a daily basis of water intake and making sure they got enough sleep. And so there are about nine of those, and we make sure people are focused on really big picture concepts of just being healthy, and that tends to take care of people's recovery.
yeah. That's great. And I you'll hear people uh, predict that this is the year that a lot of people who are either employed coaches at high schools and colleges or employed personal trainers at brick and mortar facilities really look into online training. I think it's already obvious so far people have had to do that out of necessity. It's probably not as much a trend as it is just like a permanent shift. But the marketplace is competitive. You've been in it quite a while and you've built a good business out of it. Can you talk to people about competition, how they should view competition, how they should view collaboration? I mean, obviously you're on here sharing your advice with people, which again we're really grateful for. So what's kind of the perspective you employ when it comes to being a part of this overall ecosystem of online trainers?
Yeah, so I very much have an abundance mindset when it comes to all of these things. I don't think there is any true competition out there. Um, when you talk about competition, if you really study business, I think competition is true amongst companies like Costco and Amazon. Like those,
Mm,
that is competition because one of them could actually die in the process of fighting the other. I don't see that happening at these relative, like we're all small businesses. Anybody doing this, like you are seen as a small business, and I think the government deems anything under $50 million per year a small business. So we're all small businesses doing this, right? And so I don't think you need to worry too much about competition because you just need to put your flag in the ground about what you stand for and let people come to you and not try to mimic what everyone else is doing. I don't even know what other people are doing. Like we used to look at those things, but after a certain point, you see your stuff getting copied enough that you're like, oh, I guess we're the market leader for this type of training or programming. But then we just ignore it, because I think that there are a lot of people out there, and they all need help, and I can't handle them all. My company can't, and your company, not your company, but the people listening to this, your company can't handle it either. So there are plenty of people who need what we're doing, and to be honest, they might just resonate more with one of us than the other.
yeah,
Maybe a mom of three would resonate more with somebody who also has kids that happens to be a fitness coach as opposed to me. And so I think that very much abundance mentality with that. I think we can all help each other out, and we're not going to shut anybody else's business down in the process by stealing a customer base.
that's right. I mean, if your flag is, that you have tattoos up to your earlobes, you like junkyard workouts throwing kicks, there's going to be an audience for you doing that, right? Might
Right.
not be your audience or mine, but for sure. The abundance mindset, there's something about that that's actually very freeing to the mind as well. I think there's an unhealthy pressure when you allow competition to be your motivation, right? It's just not healthy. I don't think it's sustainable. I kind of flirted with that early in my business years and years ago. And I just heard enough smart people in really successful businesses say the exact thing that you said, Jerred, which is if you always follow your competition, let that pressure you. For one, you're always going to be one step behind. And two, if that's your mission, it's just a very opaque mission. People are not going to buy into that. You kind of have to believe in yourself and not worry about the competition. Something to that degree, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it, people don't operate in these um, one thing forever mentality when it comes to programming or education or anything. They might just cycle through. You might be their January through March program that they like to follow, and that's fine. If you want
Yeah.
to come back and train with us for 3 months every single year, that's great. But I think people will stick around or they don't. You definitely want them to, but with how people use fitness these days, it might just be part of the process.
Yeah. Do you think an overall larger portion of the population is getting into fitness? I want to feel like it is. The millennial generation likes to do it, I think, more so than the older generations. Also, people like strength training. I want to credit CrossFit with that. You may disagree, but when I before CrossFit came out, the only people you saw training with barbells like that were collegiate athletes. And then after CrossFit, everyone wanted to touch a barbell who had never touched a barbell before. I thought that made a really big wave for the strength training industry in the private sector, in my humble opinion.
No, I 100% agree with you. Stating earlier that I was kind of not into CrossFit. I'm not anti CrossFit as far as hate everything that they do. I think a lot of good came from CrossFit. Like I even took their level one, you know, 8 9 years ago or something like that, and I was impressed with the information overall. Like they really wanting to teach good movement in the very
Mm.
basics and nutrition principles. So there's a lot of good that has come with CrossFit. Don't get me wrong, and that is definitely one of them. I can't remember the coach's name. Is it Pinleg? Who's passed away? Is it?
Oh,
Did I have the right?
Mike Penley, the inventor
Yeah,
of the Penley row.
yeah. So anyway, he mentioned as one of the top weightlifting coaches in the world how much CrossFit has done for the sport of weightlifting, and
Mm,
that's all he's done his whole life, right? So I'm going to trust his opinion on that. Is
yeah.
he's just he saw it, the people amount of people, because what happens is you get into CrossFit, you find out it's really hard and it's hard every day, and people
Mm,
don't like that. Either some people do and then some people don't, and then I think that's what shoots off into, well, I know all this barbell stuff now, I'll go do powerlifting, I'll go do weightlifting, I'll go do something else. I think that's kind of the spin-offs of CrossFit, and I think there's a lot of good that comes from that.
yeah. I think if there's anything that should be encouraging to strength coaches out there, right? People who consider themselves a strength coach, is that strength training is not the kind of market where someone can come in and be the Apple of it. F45 and Orange Theory can't come in and deliver the same experience that a coach can. And I think that's what makes it really well poised to be suitable for many, many small businesses, as opposed to seeing who's going to be the next Beachbody or who's going to be the next Tybo Billy Blanks. It just doesn't, I just think that's going to happen. And thankfully, people really like strength training. When I first started Team Builder 8 years ago, people didn't really, I had really explained to them what strength and conditioning was. They thought it was a Gold's Gym. And then now, like, I meet random guys who, love talking about snatching and stuff. They just started lifting a year ago. So it's an encouraging sign. I mean, it's going to be a growing business. When I refer to it as strength training, that's someone comfortable using a barbell and someone comfortable coaching a barbell.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, I think a lot of people are going to get into fitness more than they have been, and I think, like we just mentioned, so CrossFit came on board, and then it really helped weightlifting and powerlifting and things like that. More people got involved, and I'm hoping the inverse happens with all this new tech. So I think things like Peloton, things like the mirror, and all these
Yeah,
like at home
total
devices
mirror.
that like get on your wall, or these bikes. I want people to get those things. And I think it's okay if you get that and you don't sign up for my stuff, because what you're going to find out is that that's really boring. Oh, after a certain amount of time, it's going to start to suck and not be very fun.
It's the Bowflex of 2020. I mean, come on.
And then you're going to want to, but you're still sold maybe on the home gym idea. And I'm
Yeah,
happy to clean up the mess, and have those people join our community after they have realized, like, I don't just want to do a cycle class
yeah,
every single day of my life.
yeah. I had a lot of thoughts over the course of the pandemic in 2020. And I basically came to the realization that many, many gyms, brick and mortar gyms, are essentially a business model where a member is renting equipment from the gym owner. And
Hmm.
they just have to show up to the gym in order to do that. And the home gym is basically an opportunity to own your equipment, but it's got some limitations. I mean, let's be frank. If you pay $10 a month and you go to Gold's Gym and you have access to all the equipment that Gold's Gym is offering you, that's a pretty dang good deal. And if you were to do that at home for yourself, it's feasible, and people are going to like it, but it's going to be having that missing component that makes a Gold's Gym a really good gym, and that would be the coaching, the instruction that comes with it. And I think that's obviously the opportunity that you recognize with the home gym is that, hey, the home gym is 100% possible, but the missing ingredient is someone to help you to kind of tell you what to do. Like you mentioned, you can change your own oil, you can write your own programs, no problem. But who wants to, if there's a better option out there, you can be that better option.
Yeah, we even have a lot of coaches sign up for our programming specifically for the change your oil. Like they do it and they know how to do
Yeah.
it, but they're like, when I program for myself, I am a little biased, or they'll skip things, and there's that belief, like when you write a program for yourself, you're not as bought in, so you want someone
Hmm.
else to do it for you, and I think that that's a big deal. And people want things that are effective and that actually work, and that's just what's not there with random daily workouts. It's like,
Hmm.
and some people, that's fine. Like if you all you want to do is get burn some calories, sweat a little bit. But there are some people who want to achieve something, and if you want to achieve something, you're going to need a coach or somebody to kind of guide you through that process. And that's why we will always be coaches in general valuable. Because you can't automate all of these things. You can try, but
Yeah,
it's just not going to always work out.
that's right. I'm a good example of that myself. I think I know over 2,000 strength coaches through Team Builder. I have access to lots of programming, and lots of coaches are happy to give me programs. I pay for Pen and Paper Strength app. Are you familiar with them? Aaron
Mm-mm.
Osmus. Um, he's a strength coach at Southern California for the football team, but he's built a nice little brand for himself, drawing workouts on a whiteboard, taking a picture and printing it into a PDF. um, it's just different when you pay for it, when you get it. um, there's a lot of people who are willing to do that. There's plenty of market. That's for sure. It's 45 minutes in, man. I'm going to finish up just by talking a little bit about your most recent book. Is this your second or third book?
Second book.
Second book. And it's really impressive that you writing a book's hard. Writing a 14-page paper in college is really hard for me, and you're writing a book and no one's even telling you to do it. That's pretty impressive. What's the second book about?
So the Garage Gym Athlete was my first book, and then Killing
Hmm.
Comfort was my second book. So the Garage Gym Athlete, it's all about becoming a garage gym athlete. I published that just to prove I wasn't just trying to get in on the trends. That was published in 2016, which means had to have been written well before that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was my first book, and it's done really well. And then the second book, it dives more into the mental side of it's really about humans. It's not necessarily for athletes. I always people are surprised after they read Killing Comfort or listen to it on Audible. They're like, it wasn't a fitness book. It's like it was never intended to be. It's a book on human behavior and trying to get
Hmm.
people to do the things that they want to do. They know they want to do and should do.
Hmm. Do you draw any of your experience in the military with this book?
Some let's see. Most of it is through entrepreneurship and
Really?
working with athletes. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things I learned about let's say just being disciplined and stuff in the military, but what I learned when I got out of the military, because I just started working with different people, like my military career was I was in the aviation world and a pilot specifically. That's what I was doing, and they're type A personalities who just do what they say they're going to do. It's just that's it. There's nothing else. And so when I left the military, and I started working with athletes who weren't as motivated, that was actually confusing for me. Call it naive, but I was just like, wait, why aren't you? You're paying me. Why aren't you doing the workouts? And so those things were confusing to me. And so trying to answer those questions year after year after year as a coach turned into developing strategies to try and help people um, get uncomfortable so they can see the results that they want to.
Yeah. Awesome. And the book is on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon and Audible.
Cool.
Reading a book much worse than writing a book, by the way. For
Yeah.
like recording it for to be published that's top three, one of the hardest things I've done in business.
What do you mean recording it? Like audiobook version?
Yeah, the audiobook version, recording it was just such a painful experience.
Well, you didn't get Tom Hanks to do it?
I should have, but no, I definitely wanted to be the person who read my own book because I have a lot of respect for books that I listen to when the author read it
Mm-hmm.
themselves. But I just
Mm-hmm.
had no idea the level of like how you have to. It's not just like reading. Like if you gave me a paragraph right now, it's not like hard to read, right? Yeah, I can read it. It's the how perfect it needs to be, and like, oh, you can't have that much inflection, so let's pause, or like, oh, your lips are touching or making like a noise when we record, so we're gonna have to start over there. It's a very very painful experience.
So you had someone there like actually stopping you, like it was like being on set or something.
Yeah,
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I've always wondered how that was like. I mean, I read out loud. You don't really read out loud often, like in everyday life, and sometimes I do. And I'm like, man, I'm much worse at reading out loud than I am just reading in my head. It's kind of funny.
yeah,
Uh,
it's very challenging.
that's challenging, right? Okay, the last question was your book's called Killing Comfort. You talked about working with unmotivated individuals. I'm just going to throw this out there because it seems like it gets thrown out there anyway a lot. Anyway, the millennial generation, you've worked with quite a few. Some people will say the millennial generation is different, that younger generations are more complacent, more, less motivated than previous generations. Because you wrote this book, it's called Killing from Comfort. Do you have a take on that?
Yeah. So
Okay, let's
I think
hear
a
it.
lot of people should read the book, The Coddling of the American Mind. So it's a
Hmm.
phenomenal book. So I think that everyone should pick that up because I think millennials are up to the age 40 now, I believe. And if
Yeah,
like as of recording this, I think it's up to the age 40. So that
that's right. I'm 30. I'm in the middle of it. Yeah.
yeah, so it's a big gap, right? It's like, can we really still blame? Like, I know a lot of successful people. Can we really still blame millennials? So my real take on millennials is kind of contrary, and it's I actually have a big part of this in my book, which is funny that you asked. I talk about millennials specifically. I think complaining about millennials is a sign of weak leadership, and not so much a problem with a millennial. Yeah, people could be more motivated, but it doesn't take you long to be an American to realize you're not going to have much if you don't put in the work. Like it's just
Mm.
how the system is built. It doesn't matter how many political changes there are. It'll take decades and decades for all of that to truly change if it ever does. And so if you just want handouts, it's not going to happen, And so I do think if you're an employer and you're complaining about uh, millennials, then you might need to focus on your leadership and really find out what it takes to uh, lead another human being. And so I think that that is the most important thing. I talk about in my book this whole everyone gets a trophy, right? That's what everyone
Mhm.
blames the millennial thing on. But you know what? I grew up in sports and I got participation trophies.
Mhm.
Never once did I make some sort of connection that everything should be handed to me. It's just not a true statement. I think that a participation trophy is actually exactly how real life works, and people don't realize it because you could go do your job, but if you're not the best in the entire world, should you get nothing or should you get your paycheck?
Mhm.
You should probably get your paycheck. And so that's the same with anything that you're doing in life. Where in life do you ever actually have to be number one to be rewarded? You never do. What you need to learn about life in general and millennials, is just you got to put in the work every single day. That's it. Like it's the process that we talked about earlier, those
The
process
process, yeah.
goals. Like that's all that matters. That's how people get paid is just putting in that. You don't really ever have to win anything. You can be
Yeah.
competitive, but at a certain point, like what are you going to win? There's no awards. Like if Team Builder is the best training software company in the world, I don't know if anyone will even ever recognize it. I'm talking about like
Mm.
with an award. You could just be happy
Mhm.
yourself that your company achieved such a thing. So yeah, I
Yeah.
could talk about that stuff for a long time, but I don't think that millennials are so much the problem as weak leadership is the problem ultimately.
Ultimately, no matter what generation the weak leadership belongs to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the
Um,
iGen, which is after is even worse, right? Like
mhm.
it as far as I know from reading the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, I'm like, oh wow, that's some dangerous stuff coming. But all of these things can be fixed with leadership, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Jerred, you started a remote training business before everyone had to this past year. Your company is 100% remote before it even had to be. You were ahead of so many trends. The very last question, I swear, we'll turn it off. Do you consider yourself lucky, smart, or a little bit of both?
I would love to say a little bit of both. Um, to be honest, the pandemic did not change much of it. Didn't change anything about our business. So
Yeah.
I clearly just wanted to run my business that way because that it was more of a lifestyle choice. Like I have been
Mm,
asked numerous times to go. Like I don't follow the mold of other coaches, like what they're trying to do, and that's probably why I'm a little bit less well known than a lot of other people. But and I'm perfectly okay with that is
yeah.
I've gotten a lot of invitations to speak at conferences and stuff, and I've turned them down over and over again to the point where you don't get asked anymore. Right? It's like they're not going to ask you. I don't like. Well, how is that going to help Garage Gym Athlete by me going to a
Yeah.
conference to talk to other strength coaches? It's just not. Like I'm happy to do
Yeah.
stuff like this because I get to stay home. I get to go hang out with my kids after this, and those are the big decisions for me. So the business was very intentionally created because I'd spent time in the military and a lot of time away from my family. I just didn't want that anymore. And so how the company was created was very intentional. So I would say smart on that side. But I do feel very lucky and fortunate because I could have very easily also opened a gym if I wanted to
Mm,
when I got
yeah.
out of the military, and I would be facing much harder problems in the pandemic. So as far as being set up for all this stuff in the pandemic hit, I, I didn't see any of that coming. I'm very lucky and fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, but it sounds like you followed your compass, though. I mean, you have always said every time I've talked to you, by the time you got out of the military, you built the business this way. I mean, you always stuck to it. You did it way before other people did.
Yeah, and it was a hard thing to stick to, and it's been very very challenging growing the company. I won't lie about any of that.
Yeah,
But it was just I wanted it to work this one way, or I wanted to go get a job somewhere.
yeah. That's the hindsight bias, right? I get that too with my company. You look back and you look at your successes and your good decisions. It's hard sometimes to look back and see your failures and see the hard parts. You know, once you've made a certain level of success, um, it's hard to do that. You tend to also exaggerate some of your victories, you know, or credit some decisions a little bit too much in retrospect. I found myself doing that anyway.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of little things that culminate to the ultimate success.
That's right. Yeah.
Because I looked for those secrets and one-off strategies for a long time. Of like, here's it's it. This is it. This is what's gonna put us on the map or blow us up or whatever. But it's not. It's just a lot of those
Yeah.
1%
The
actions that
1% every day.
that
That's
ultimately
right.
grow the business.
That's beautiful, man. All right, we'll end it there. I thank you so much for coming on. When I said I wanted to get someone on first thing in January to really kind of help be a leader and a mentor to people who are coming onto the Team Builder Payments portal, you were the first person I thought of, and it was for all the obvious reasons. I didn't want the biggest name I could get. I just wanted someone who was going to be the most generous with their insight and their knowledge, and you're that person. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. If you ever want to do it again, let me know. I
Amazing.
love Team Builder, the company, and all you guys are doing, and how you've supported us over the years as well. So, really big fan.
That's amazing. It's a grateful partnership. Everyone, Jerred Moon, Endo3 Fitness, Garage Gym Athlete, you can find them online. We don't have to go through listing all the hashtags and at signs, right?
Right.
All right, man. Good to talk to you, and I'll see you around.
All right, man. Sounds good.
All right, see you.